Hey, what's going on, guys? I got a special guest here today. We have Matt Haycox. He's an entrepreneur, a business investor who co-invests and lends to businesses with a story. He's known as the funding guru and has lent over 500 million pounds of funding to UK businesses. Matt, how are you doing today?
Good, buddy. Good to see you. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
it's good to see you too. I'm excited about this one. And I wanted to start off with, how do you think about networking in the regard of how are you getting the right people in the room? Because it's an incredible talent and most people can't do it. So how are you making it happen?
I mean, I think like most things, even though it's a talent, it's a learnable talent. I mean, look, people. There's always going to be someone who's got a little more charisma than the next guy. But I think anyone can apply the fundamental principles of networking, and I mean, look, relationship building is absolutely integral to both my business now, and I think any business I've ever really had. If I look back over the last 20 years of business and business success, then every single one of my major stepping stones of my major successes, I can attribute every one of them to an individual deal or an individual relationship with the person that's going to help propel me along. So, the value of having great relationships is very, very, very tangible. And in terms of networking to achieve them, I think networking gets a bad name because ultimately I think people do it wrong. And for me, when you walk into whatever, you walk into a meeting room or some convention full of hundreds or thousands of people, and you're just there giving out business cards willy nilly to people that you don't even know what they are. I mean, it's kind of, I guess that's almost like the business equivalent of just going on countless blind dates, and if you got lucky, then great, you got lucky. But the chances of actually meeting a girl or meeting a guy that looks like you want, with the interests that you want, that's got the same outlook on life as you want, is very, very slim. So for me, one of the first steps of networking is to pre-plan who you actually want to meet. Don't just go out there randomly looking to connect with people. Now, that's not to say don't have an open mind, because yeah, sure, when you meet new people in any business context or in an event or something, then sure, have an open mind to how you may be able to grow a relationship and bond together. But if you're really trying to power network for business purposes, then the number one key is to pre-identify your targets. Be really thought out and methodical about it. And like say, most of the people, everyone I've met or everyone I've built a great relationship rather, has come from one of two ways. I've either systematically known that I've wanted to meet that particular person because I've known that is going to add value for me, or that they're a particular investor that I think I could do a deal with, or I just know that they come from, let's say, a demographic that's going to be beneficial to me. So I like to network with high net worth investors because I like to take investor money to deploy into the deals we do. So I know that if I go to fancy charity event, the Pit Lanes Grand Prix, or if I'm sat in the lounge of a private jet company or something, these are the kind of places that are going to have the people that I want to. Then why would you hate networking? You only hate it because you're not doing it right.
Yes, absolutely. And I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think the key thing is intentionality. So many people miss the intentional nature of this is who I'm trying to meet. I want to meet this person, yes, as a business contact. And as you grow your business, it gives you more leeway and more patience to, I can be friends with a high net worth individual for 5 years and not do a deal with them. I don't have to put pressure on it right away, but we get to know each other. I think that's so powerful. So,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, look, I guess that's stage two, when I guess you want to start to build that relationship with, then when it comes to building, trying to transact too soon, trying to sell and burning that relationship, before you've even had to really want to build long-term, genuine connections, then you've got to do it from a place of giving, not taking. You've got to do it from a position of just genuinely wanting to build a relationship, and knowing that you guys are going to get on great together, and you have to play the long game. Whether it takes 6 months to get where you want to be, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or maybe even never, because you may not get that sale out of that person that you wanted to on day one, but just by having them in your network, it's been a enjoyable experience. As long as you surround yourself by the right people, there's all kinds of different positive outcomes that are going to come from it, but not expecting to receive.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I've seen that a numerous amount of times where people you might be around someone and they're an influential person and they'll introduce you to other influential people, and you might do a deal with the friend of a friend of a friend, and that will guide you along the way. So, Matt, I understand that true networking takes long durations of time. For you, though, at a very young age, you had great success. How did you manage to do that?
Well, I mean, listen, I wouldn't necessarily say I had great success from networking at a young age. I mean, I think I've always, I think it's only as I've gotten older and probably being able to look back on the things I've done or how I've done it, that I've been able to distill it more into a kind of a process of how to network. I mean, look, I think I always saw the value in having great people around me, people that I could learn from, or people that I could transact with, or just people that I could hang out with. Because again, look, we always talk about networking in that business sense, but really all networking is building relationships with great people, and you don't just want to do. I'm here in Dubai now. I moved to Dubai 3 years ago. When I came here, I didn't know a single person. Yes, obviously from a business perspective, I've been doing networking here, but just from a general social perspective as well. I want to meet great people to hang out with, to enjoy my social circle, to go to the gym with, to play tennis with, or whatever. And it's that same kind of mentality that you need to be thoughtful and intentional and process driven about who you network with for business, but you'd be doing just the same thing in your personal life anyway. If you're a fan of boxing, then you're not going, and you move to baseball players because you know that they're not going to be someone that you've got something immediately in common with, and you've just got to apply that same logic. Like I said, looking back, I probably, anything I did in my early days was probably more by luck than by judgment. But I guess we all have a natural skill at something, and mine's probably always been in seeing the value of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact how you pulled it apart and distinguished that it's not just business, but there's family relationships, sport relationship, hobby relationships, and those can interchange. And those hobbies that you do with people can also become business, or the business people can become hobbies as you connect in different ways. But it deepens the relationship that you're looking for because most people don't want to just sit. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that, look, having a great relationship, fixes every problem. Whether the problem is you want to sell more, whether the problem is you want to pay less, whether the problem is you need to get from a stepping stone to a stepping stone to someone else. I mean, just before we came on this podcast, I took a phone call from a friend of mine back in England who's got a business problem, that he basically needs me to help mediate, if you like, between him and the person he's having a problem with. Now, I can only do that because I've accidentally built a good relationship with multiple people in this guy's business and social circle, and I guess I can have easy access to that, and I come, being vouched for effectively. But I mean, that's just one example of a million circumstances. If you have a relationship, that's deep, then it's going to solve all of your issues.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that as a trusted person because you want to give first. So it's that intangible of helping out the other people first. So Matt, you faced a lot of adversity in your 20s where you had the big success with the restaurants and then it all kind of came piling down. What was that like on your mindset? How did you bounce back from that? How did you think about that?
So, yeah, just to flesh out the context of that story, I mean, from my early 20s to 27, 28, I had a very successful chain of bars, clubs, pubs, nightclubs, retail shops, and everything. And I built that as a kind of a hungry 20-year-old, off the back of, I guess, grit, ambition, luck, and a lot of borrowed money. And ultimately, that borrowed money that was my success tool was ultimately also my downfall when things came wrong. Things went wrong because I had a business that was built on a bed of sand, was stacked like a deck of cards, and when one of those cards was pulled, which happened in June, July 2008, when the credit crunch was starting to kick in. And for anyone too young to know what the 2008 credit crunch is, we're recording this in October 2023, the time that markets are crashing, recessions are looming, and liquidity is tightening. Think that, but just think it 15 or 18 years ago, and that's what I was going through then. And ultimately, when one of the businesses started to have a problem, it had a knock-on effect to all of the businesses. My businesses went into administration, or I guess what you guys in America would probably call some form of Chapter 11. And I was also made personally bankrupt because I had personal guarantees on all of these businesses. And I had, at the time, I had a 1-year-old daughter. I was married to her mum. And yeah, I mean, literally in the space of 6 or 8 weeks, I went from running an 8-figure business to living a 7-figure lifestyle to waking up the next day with literally nothing. And so yeah, so that's the context of the story. But I almost feel that the story is a big build up to a letdown of an answer, because whenever people say to me, well, where was your mindset at? You must have been, depressed, suicidal. How do you ever get back from that? For me, it was really just a matter of I didn't really see what my option was if I didn't try and come back from that. And I say I could have sat back home, watching Jerry Springer and crying on the couch all day about how good things could have been, or I can go back out the next day and go back to work again. And I had a 1-year-old daughter who needed feeding. I had a wife who needed a roof over her head, and I always say that I was never born to be poor. So for me, it was a matter of get back on the horse and get back at it. But I think as well, the real key takeaway for people from this is when people talk about people going bankrupt, or losing the money in business, they always refer to them as having lost everything. And I think that's the big mistake. That's the big misconception, that I didn't lose everything at all. In fact, I only lost my money. I didn't lose anything else. I still had my education, my relationships, my knowledge, and if anything, I at that point had more knowledge because I just experienced knowledge of going through bankruptcy. So when I started to make my money the second time around, I did it a lot quicker than I did it the first time around, because when I made the money the first time around, I was 8, 9 years younger, 8, 9 years less experienced, 8, 9 years less of relationships, and those intangibles, that knowledge, that resilience, those relationships, they're the things that can never be taken from you. And I guess ultimately, in hindsight, then, well, not in hindsight, but looking back to then, I guess I learned this by accident. Really, it was, I wasn't. This wasn't a thought through process. If you talk to me now about looking back on the experience, I can always say that things like bankruptcy don't really scare me at my stage and my age, etc. Now, because I know that if I was to lose money in a business today, I would still be back in the game tomorrow with with another contact, with another investor relationship, with another idea. Now, look, back then I didn't formally know that, but I guess I just accidentally knew it because I didn't let my ego get in the way, and and I had a driving force, and like I said, that driving force was to feed and clothe my child, and to make sure that I got out of the taxi and got back into the Ferrari at some point soon.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because when you think about it, if your habits day in and day out for 8, 9 years are work, 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 then that's all you know. It's not even like this idea of like, oh, pout and dismay, because everyone's like, when you hear that story of all the success, and then you think that was the only failure that happened to Matt along the way of all the success. Like, my
Well,
point is that there's many failures along the way.
absolutely. And I think maybe I've never really thought of this term or said this before, but I think an analogy for the bankruptcy would almost be like when a sports player has been playing football all his life, and at 26 years old, he has a bad accident on the pitch, and he breaks his ankle, for example. Okay, that's going to take him out of the game. That's going to involve an operation. It's going to involve 6 months of not playing and rehabilitation and everything else that goes with it. And yes, he's going to be a little bit weak, but when he steps back on that field again, he's not starting from zero. He's still got those 26 years of football knowledge, of experience, of muscle memory, of tactics, of everything else. He's not starting from scratch. He's just been taken out of the game temporarily. I mean, maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but I think
No,
I think
no,
it should get the message across.
I think it's a great analogy because it really makes sense where it's funny because I was walking with my fiance this morning and she's like, "Oh, what happens if someone goes bankrupt?" Well, I'm like, "This happens, this happens, this happens, blah 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 blah." And to me, it was like, "Oh, dude, that sounds scary." But as we're on this podcast and you're explaining bankruptcy, I'm like, "Wow, it's not that scary." Like it does suck, but but you have the relationships, you have the knowledge, you have the ideas, you can still get back out there.
I think the other thing that's important to understand, as well as people often think of bankruptcy as this surprise, and they say, "Oh, what happens during a bankruptcy?" And it's as if that everything was amazing yesterday, and then today, you've got this big bankruptcy problem. Bankruptcy doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's not, the bankruptcy is the culmination of many months and months, potentially even years, of bad financial problems. And as you've found out by now, I'm a guy who likes his analogies, and the analogy that I always give for this is imagine somebody who's suffering from terminal cancer, and their life is shit. They're waiting to die. They're on chemotherapy, radiotherapy, whatever it is. They're puking, choking, having permanent pain all the time. When they die, that death is like a blessing to them. I mean, it's the end of months of torture and months of horrific treatment. And when you compare that to the bankruptcy situation, you've been suffering. You've not just had everything going amazing today and gone bankrupt tomorrow. You've been living a life with a business that's been failing. With red letters blocking up the door, with staff leaving, with customers not paying, with suppliers not being able to get paid. You haven't been sleeping. You've had horrendous stress. And what the bankruptcy is effectively an end to all of those problems. And very often you get people trying to delay that bankruptcy, to prolong that bankruptcy. When they're in bad financial problems, and they go, "No, I don't want to go bankrupt because it's going to fuck up my credit rating." Like, what are you talking about? Your credit's been fucked for 2 years. You've not been able to pay a bill on time. For forever. Nobody will deal with you. Nobody will lend to you. What the bankruptcy is going to do is it's going to reset everything. It's going to draw a line under it, and and allow you to start from scratch again. Now, I'm also always very conscious when I talk about this. I don't want to sound like I'm glamorizing bankruptcy. Like nobody wants to wake up and go bankrupt. It's not this great badge of honor, but it's just something that if you understand it, then you don't need to be scared of it.
And that is such a healthy mindset for someone who's investing and lending, because then you don't have this, oh, it's the end of the world. I put money in something and it's not working. Like, so how do you carry that headspace into what you're up to today? Because I feel like you basically switched sides. You went from taking a
Yeah, so
loan.
Yeah, I mean, look, I became a lender having learned how to be a lender by being a borrower, and I was a successful borrower in terms of I learned how to present my case to borrow money, and I was also a failed borrower insofar as it all went wrong, and my lenders lost a lot of money for dealing with me, and I think that skill set has taught me well on both sides. First of all, it's great for when I deal with borrowers because I very much have been in their shoes. I know what it feels like to be them. I know their problems. I know solutions to their problems, and I know how to help them present themselves in the best possible light to be able to raise money. And it also helps me with my investor conversations because I can actually sit down and go, look, yes, I had a turbulent past. In the beginning of my journey, and yes, I went bankrupt. But for you guys, this is actually a good educational experience because yes, my lenders lost a lot of money, but they lost money because they did things wrong. And I know the things they've done wrong. Therefore, when I structure my loans to my borrowers, I structure them in a way where things can't go wrong, or certainly can't go as wrong as other people would potentially expose themselves to, and my investors get to benefit from that experience. And I always say that we don't learn anything from the things that go right. We only learn it from the things that go wrong because when something goes wrong, we get to look back at it and dissect it and really play out that process. And I can't think of many better areas than lending money for for needing things to go wrong as experience. Lending money is very easy. Collecting money is a very different story. And it's only once you've put it out the door and experience the people not wanting to pay you back that you really know all the tricks and the idiosyncrasies and the things the things that you need to be aware of. It's very easy to go, well, I've got this document signed, it's a loan agreement, or it's a personal guarantee, or I've got a security over that piece of asset. But that's only the first part of the jigsaw. Having the legal paperwork is one thing, but how do you put that into place, and how do you collect it out? And yeah, I guess I learned in the trenches, and now I bring that to the benefit of both myself, my lenders, and my investors, my borrowers and my
Absolutely.
investors.
Absolutely. And would you say that the relationship is more important than the paperwork? Like obviously the paperwork's important, but I'm saying if someone's like giving you a tough time, like you already know if someone's going to pay you back kind of. Like obviously some people turn and things happen, but I mean, how do you think about that? Cuz like what is the entirety of the like if you were to simplify the lending business, you lend it. Just explain the lending business first and then we can dive into that.
Well, look, I mean, one of the first things I say to anyone who's thinking about lending money is you have to go into it expecting that nobody wants to pay you back,
Okay.
because ultimately, that is the reality. And I think in anything, if you set yourself up for disappointment, then anything else is a bonus. Uh, and the reality is, we talk about how money changes everything, that money changes relationships, money damages family relationships and stuff, and that may or may not be true in each people's individual circumstances. But I think what money is it's a great amplifier or a great leveler. When I deal with people who are wanting to borrow money, or when I'm dealing with people who are trying not to pay it back, the different light you see them in, the stories and the lies and the bullshit you hear. I mean, honestly, I don't think I've ever once chased somebody for money that they're late paying who hasn't got a story of a serious hospital illness or a death in the family. Now, again, I'm not being disrespectful to anyone who really has a serious hospital illness or a death in the family, but I think it was pretty coincidental that every single borrower I've ever lent to has had a death in the family, just around the day that they're due to pay us back. And so but when you talk about relationship, look, paper first of all, the paperwork is utterly essential. I mean, again, very often people say, oh well, that paper is not worth the paper it's written on. You need the person to want to pay you back. I mean, listen, if things aren't structured properly, then yes, absolutely, you need people to want to pay you back. But the key to structuring a loan, or the key to structuring a good loan, is to make sure that you've got leverage over something that will put you in pole position, or certainly a high position to be able to get paid back. Now that's point one, but even with leverage, there's still times when you need the borrower to be cooperative. You need them to be on side, and that's when obviously relationship helps. And I always say that we're never there to be hostile with a borrower. Look, if someone can't pay, then they can't pay. But there's a big difference between can't pay and won't pay. And
Yeah.
if someone can't pay, we will often work, well, not often, we'll always work with them to get the best solution for both parties, because being aggressive isn't always the best solution. Sometimes being aggressive is the best solution. And, and when you're dealing with a totally uncooperative borrower who wants to be hostile, who wants to do everything possible not to pay you back, then you've got to come at them with all barrels, and you've got to make their life a misery. But that's one time out of 10, 7, 8, 9 times out of 10, you're dealing with a decent person who is just in a problem. But it's also very difficult, because, you want to help somebody so that you can help them to get the best for both of you. But quite often helping someone, what is positive for them is to our detriment. And also, and ultimately, we lend money to get it back. It's either my money or it's my investor's money, and we have to, we have to protect that. And quite often, I'll have to have a conversation with a borrower who says, but if you come after us for that loan, then we're going to lose our family house and my kids are going to be on the street. And listen, that brings me no pleasure whatsoever. But the reality is, if every time I hear that, I turn around and go, "Don't worry, you keep that loan, you keep that house," then it won't be long before I'm losing my house, and and it's me on the streets, and my kids are on the street. So look, when someone enters a loan, they enter a contract, they've got an obligation to perform, and they need to perform it. But there's no need to be hostile. There's no need to be predatory. We can make just enough money by dealing reasonably with people. So that's what we try to do. Well, that's what we do. But sometimes people make it difficult for you.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that perspective of it, because it's not always this glamorous, "Oh, it's incredible," and I think that's good to realize, because the loan business is an interesting one. It can be very profitable, it can be really work well, but there are some difficulties in it. And also when you say
I
the
mean, I mean,
person.
the key is to pick. You've got to pick the borrowers right in the first place.
So
And
so
there's a there's a
how do you think about that? How do you think about what are intangibles for someone, especially in this market that we're in, October 2023, where money's tightened a lot? How do you think about that?
Well, I think, look, whether it's a good economic time, whether it's a bad economic time, the key first question you need to ask yourself is, what is that person borrowing the money for? Now, look, I only deal in business loans, so I don't do consumer loans. I'm not lending to Mrs. Smith to buy a new conservatory or go on a holiday, or pay for a grandkid's wedding. I'm purely lending for a business scenario. And like any scenario, there's good scenarios and there's bad scenarios. So I always want to be lending initially for a positive business purpose. That could be opening a new outlet, or opening a new division, or taking on some new staff for a new contract that's been won. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out, but the intention from day one is a positive one. It's one of growth. Now that differs very, very much from a business that's already in trouble, that's got a black hole to plug, and it wants money from us just to plug some of that black hole. Think of it like a sinking ship with holes in the side, and someone's running around, sticking the fingers in the holes. The ship's going down. It's just a matter of time, and whether or not you're one of those lenders stuck on that ship at the outset. So key one, why do they want the money? We want a good story, and a good positive reason as to why they want the money. Secondly, what is the security if it all goes wrong? Because it could be a lovely story, and it could be a very experienced business. It's got plenty of track record, but we've all seen that little writing in small print at the bottom of financial statements that says past performance is no guarantee of future success. And things don't always work out. So if they don't work out, what is the asset that we're going to take back? What are we going to secure ourselves against? Now, in my line of business, it's typically property, residential or commercial property. It could be property owned by the business. It could be property owned by the shareholders, directors, investors of that business. Something that we can attach a lien on, a mortgage to, so that if the underlying loan goes wrong, then we can take it back. But then when you look at that security, there's all kinds of implications as well. How long is it going to take you to collect it? Because it, if you've lent in the wrong way, it could take you 2 years or 3 years or 4 years to get out of a problem. During that time, the value of the asset's been eroded. The value, the net present value of your money is declining as well. So these are the key considerations. Then you get into the granular aspects of looking at accounts, looking at bank statements, looking at any other due diligence and paperwork that may try and marry those things together. And it's always very important to look at things that help you marry different statements together. When somebody says, "Oh, we're going to do this great business because we've won this contract," well, where is the contract? Let's have a look at the contract. Or these are my accounts. I just made $1 million last year. Okay, great. Well, let me see the bank statements to match to those, because it's very easy to fake a set of accounts. And I don't even mean necessarily fraudulently. It's very easy to put artistic license on a set of accounts. It's very difficult. Well, it's not difficult. Unless they've completely fabricated a set of bank statements, it's impossible to lie about the cash flow of a business from the bank statement. So we want to marry all these documents together. But before you even get into that, what's the reason they want the money, and what are you going to take off them if it all goes wrong? And those are your two key questions.
Yeah, I love that, because it really explains it. It explains the lending business in a very simply. You know what I mean? It's understanding what people want with their story, like what is their growth that they're looking for, and then it's the due diligence. And I think this is good for anyone listening, that you guys should kind of do this with the people you talk to. Like, these are the relationships you're getting into. And I'm not saying like everyone's in the lending business. I'm just saying like this is the type of due diligence Matt does when he's lending to people. This is what you need to do when you're meeting new partners, meeting new friends, investigating partners, and everything in all relationships. So it's really important to understand where they're coming from. And then, Matt, for you, what do you think is the best way for
Well,
people? Are you there?
yeah, yeah. I was just going to say, just before you asked me that question, I think the one thing that everyone can take away from this, because I know you just said then, look, not all of you are in the lending business. Look, the reality is most people aren't in the lending business, but what everybody who's in the business of businesses, they're probably all borrowers, or they may not be regular borrowers, but everybody in business normally borrows some money at some time. And what you really want to do is listen to everything I just said that I do as a lender, and go and reverse engineer that in the opposite as a borrower. And when people sit down and start crying, "Oh, this business won't lend me money, this lender won't lend me money, it's so unfair." Well, there's normally a very clear reason why they won't. And I have just told you very clearly what we look at when when we want to make a loan, or when we want to make a good loan, and what we think looks like a good loan. So take what I've told you and play it in reverse, and make sure that when you present your case to a lender, you present it in its best possible way. Because so often, not so, I mean, the majority of loan applications we see are terrible. Now, that's not to say necessarily that we don't always do some of those, because we help them present the loan application in a more presentable manner. But you're already off on the wrong foot. You're already at risk of me being too busy or too grumpy that day to want to put the effort in. If I get a scrap of paper with 2 or 3 lines of handwritten story versus a very clear document that lists out everything to me that I need to know about the business, why you want the loan, what security you're going to give me, how are you going to pay it back, if it all goes wrong, what are you going to do for me then? If I've got all that in one simple, clear document, and it adds up to the kind of story that I already told you I want, then it's very, very difficult for me to ignore that. And every lender has their own different appetite. And my advice would be to go and ask those lenders what their appetite is. You can't put a square peg in a round hole. If a lender only likes lending on racing cars, then he's not going to lend you any money for a powerboat. If they only like lending on houses, they're not going to lend you any money to buy an aeroplane. So go and ask the lender what they want. This is not secret sauce. This is not confidential information. Everybody will happily tell you what it is, and go and present your story accordingly.
Yeah, because I mean that skill works with anybody. That question of, hey, what would winning look like for you here today? That's beneficial for everyone, because you're not going to guess how people live. And you can do that in regard to, like I said, relationships, hangouts, partnerships, anything. So Matt, for you, the one of the final things I want to touch on is I know you know about obviously business credit. What do you think about personal credit and how people handle that situation? And like, what are some tips you would give on that? Because if you look at it right now, it's like 48,000 is the average personal debt in America. Like, it's just astonishing. Like, there's so much debt being. How do you think about all that?
Well, look, personal credit and good personal credit, I believe, is absolutely essential for good business borrowing. Now, a lot of people get angered by this comment because they always think, well, why should my personal credit matter? My business is borrowing the money, not me. But what you need to appreciate is that every small business, pretty much, is inextricably linked with its owner. You know, you look at Edwards Consulting. Edwards Consulting is the NLC. It is 100%. Jordan's behaviour and Jordan's mentality and the way Jordan behaves. So, and you don't get as good information from a business credit report as you do from a personal credit report. I can see much more, granular information in that personal credit report. And if I look at your report,
Yeah.
Jordan, and I can see on there that you've got 7, 8, 9, 10 credit cards, that they're always up at the limits, that you always miss the payment when it's due. Okay, you make it up 3 or 4 days later, but you still miss it. And all these kind of things, then I can pretty much guarantee that you behave in exactly the same way in your business as well. Um, and ultimately, what we're looking at there is it's not even an indication of how much money you have or haven't got. It's how do you behave? Because people always go, well, why are you complaining? Yes, I missed the payment on the first of the month, but I made it up again on the third, and I always make it up on the third. Well, that's not the point. It's just an indication of how disorganized you are as an individual, and that I'm going to be getting involved with a headache from day one. And any lender, okay, listen, maybe a huge lender has got more money to deal with than they can put out the door. But a small private lender like me, whether my book's 50 million or 100 million or 200 million, it's small in the grand scheme of things. And I've always got more deals to lend on than I've got money to do. So why am I going to get involved in something that I know is a headache on day one? A lot of the things that don't look like a headache turn out to be a headache, and that I'll never know. But the things that look like a headache on day one, I'm going to avoid them like the plague. And how someone behaves with their personal credit is a massive red flag about not getting involved from the outset. Um, so yeah, so that is something to bear in mind. So if you have bad personal credit, you should work as hard as possible to correct it. I mean, I know most of your audience is probably American, and I'm no expert on how you clean up American credit, but I would imagine that the same principles apply pretty much universally, and that really is do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. So if you take a credit card out, then set it up on automated payments so that as a bare minimum, the minimum monthly payment goes through on time every month.
Yeah.
Ideally, don't even use your credit cards unless absolutely essential, or use them but pay them off. If you rent a property, pay your rent on time. If you take a mortgage, pay your mortgage on time. Don't take too much debt relative to your overall income, to your overall assets. Just simple common sense principles, really. And in England, I mean, we have a service called Experian or Equifax. I pay
Yeah.
I do it on my own personal credit. I pay £10 a month, $12 a month, or whatever it is, and I see a permanent credit file of how my credit looks, and I get that email where it goes, your credit has gone down 20 points. You think, shit, what's that for? My credit's gone up 50 points. But it's a really, really essential tool, because a lot of time problems happen when you don't know about them. Even if you're a very organized person, accidents happen, fraud happens. Someone could clone your cards or put bills in your name, and if you don't know about that, that could then end up adversely affecting your credit file. And once things are on it, they're very difficult to get off. They're very time consuming to get off. So if you can have an early indicator of that, it can be a lifesaver. So I really recommend that $10 a month payment, for anyone in business, or not, even if you're not looking to borrow money now. The problem with credit is it takes so long to build, and you can damage it so quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can literally take you 3, 4, 5, 7 years to build a perfect credit profile, and you can slaughter the life out of it with one or two silly mistakes in a month. So even if you don't think you want to borrow yet, make sure you're paying attention to it for the day that you do, and having good personal credit. It's actually again, people talk about credit and think about debt and think of it as a bad thing. Having good credit gives you access to things that people who've got bad credit don't have access to. Like leasing a car. And I mean, again, there's more leasing options in America for you guys than there is for us in the UK. But I mean, you can, if you've got good credit, you can lease a great new car in America for $200, $300, $400 a month.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go and buy that car, that could be $100,000 car that that you're leasing. The math just doesn't add up. You want to be leasing it, and you're only going to be able to get that option if you've got good credit.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think it's so important because there's people that completely miss the ball on the whole credit thing. And it comes down to measuring and monitoring what we're doing. And if we measure it, it will improve. If we don't measure, we can't improve. And why do we focus more on our business stats than our personal stats? Like we should be focusing on what's going on personally and business wise. It's super important. So, Matt, I know we're coming down to the last few minutes. Where can people hear about you? Where can they find out about you? And if they want to learn more about you, what's the spot?
Well, look, you can find me online. I am all over the internet. I have my own podcast too, the Matt Haycox Show. I write a newsletter that goes out every Friday. I have a website. I'm very active on all things social. On social, I'm the Matt Haycox. That's TheMattHaycox. My website's www.matt-haycox.com. Jump on either of those. I put a lot of content out there. I do a lot of podcasts. I always answer questions. Love to get involved. Love to help. So yeah, please, look me up, follow me, and reach out.
Absolutely. I'll put all that in the show notes. Matt, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thanks, Jordan.